Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right?
Hey, welcome to Plain Talk. This is Chad Oban. I'm in the captain's seat today. I'm usually in the co-pilot seat. I got to be honest, it's a little nerve-wracking to be in the captain's seat, but I'm so happy we have our co-pilot here today, Pat Finken, longtime political operative and former owner of Odney Advertising. I said earlier to him that he is often blamed by some for the one-party system in North Dakota and also credited by others for the one-party system. Pat, thanks for being here. How you doing?
Good, and glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation, especially a chance to chat with Kelly. I mean, there's a lot of great things going on in North Dakota, and I'm sure he'll have a chance to cover those. So I'm excited about doing the show. Thanks for having me.
So our special guest today is Governor Kelly Armstrong, longtime friend of the show. Thanks for being here today, Kelly.
The Mets are terrible.
The Mets are terrible. That was going to be my last question. Between the Dodgers bullpen and the Mets, they're one game ahead of the Reds.
They're tied.
They're tied. They're tied. Kelly, what is going on with the Mets? You can't even give me a tough time for the Dodgers payroll, and the Mets have about the same payroll.
Well, lucky for me, I've been a Mets fan since 1986, so I'm used to it.
You're used to this. Well, I will point out that Pat Finken is wearing his Vikings garb today because of Carson Wentz and the big win last weekend.
And that is just really cool for North Dakota. It's cool for Carson. It's cool for Vikings fans. It's just, sometimes in sports you get those synergies. And I mean, even, the vast majority of North Dakotans are Vikings fans, but the ones who aren't wear the fact that they're not like a badge of honor. But I think most North Dakotans, if not all, were Vikings fans on Sunday.
I was fortunate. I was at the game, and it was wild. It was so much fun to see that crowd and to see the reception that Carson got even before the game by the Minneapolis media. And now since then, suddenly they're talking about, well, is he the guy long term? It's just and so happy for Bismarck native Carson Wentz and how well that went. So,
and you got to love the pictures of him as a kid with the mop top at a Vikings game in the stands as a kid. It's good stuff. Governor Armstrong,
I don't want to hear anything from either of you because I'm a Twins fan, and I went to see the Twins on Saturday, and that was abysmal.
Well, they're terrible, but at least they have no hope. So,
yeah. There you go. All right, Governor, you've had some thoughts in the last week about free speech. We've had you on this podcast over the last couple of years where you've talked about being a free speech absolutist. I know you are. You reiterated that last week in a couple talk shows. What do you say about this whole Jimmy Kimmel thing? The government's role in that. What are your thoughts?
I'll tell you the same thing I tell high school seniors when they come into my office. If you say horrible or abhorrent things that offend the sensibility of normal society, with all due respect, I hope you're eating alone in the lunchroom. I hope your friends shun you. I hope your communities tell you that's unacceptable behavior. But me as the governor shouldn't be able to stop you from saying that. And for me, this isn't new. I've been in you could find 6 different congressional hearings where I've went off on both sides of the aisle on free speech and dealing with it. And I think, and I think also, like, just from a practical standpoint, I think it was an unforced, tactical error. I mean, just the business model for late night is a mess right now anyway, right? You have Colbert, you have all this. You think it was more likely or less likely Jimmy Kimmel would have been back on the air if the government never weighed in at all? But the best cure for speech is always more speech. And I don't care if it's in the middle of a pandemic. I don't care if it's a Republican governor or president. I don't care if it's a Democratic president. I think the fundamental problem with free speech and any prohibitions on it whatsoever from the government is whoever's in power is going to censor the opposing viewpoint. I watched it for 4 years on judiciary and oversight and weaponization. The coin flips. It's in that spot. So my answer is let them all say dumb things. That doesn't mean you can't get fired. Doesn't mean you can't get pulled off of TV. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get fired because you should. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get pulled off of TV because I think you should. But the amount of double standard that runs in this space is concerning to me. And I mean, we went through cancel culture and a lot of that, and I didn't like that then, and I don't like it now.
I think there's a
pretty
difference
simple for
between.
me.
Do you think there's a difference between entertainment like Jimmy Kimmel? And by the way, you're absolutely right. That business model is not going to do well, and he probably would have had some boycotts and all that thing. And
Still
the
is
market
right now,
would
by
have
the way.
right.
Still
The-
is.
The
And that's-
market, the market would have taken care of him appropriately in that situation. But I tend to agree. Having Carr say something was inappropriate for the government. But is there a difference between entertainment and the news media? You know, Kevin Kramer for years and still does talk a lot about bias in the news media. And what makes that different is that they're using public airwaves. It's not that that's a private enterprise, that's public airwaves. Do you see a difference in that environment?
Theoretically, yes, Pat. I mean, theoretically, yes, but I think that I think you're seeing it. The market's going to correct, right? Like less and less people get their. I mean, Fox News's ratings are higher than NBC's, ABC's, CBS's. I mean, theoretically, absolutely, it is public airwave. But again, whoever's in charge is going to set. Whoever is in control is going to set the metrics. And nobody has ever been able to explain to me who can adequately police the policers. And it doesn't matter who's in charge. So theoretically, sure, you practically put that on a piece of paper that you'd get the most liberal Democrat to agree with the most conservative Republican on, okay, think about this when you're not in charge and how you want it to work. I think there's a reason more people are going to different sources of media, are getting their news in different places. I mean, I think one of the weirder questions that we don't talk about enough, and I've talked about this a lot, for as big as Facebook gets or X gets or broadcast news gets or, you know, any of that stuff, nobody's covering, none of those people are covering the Dickinson Rough Rider American Legion baseball team.
Right.
I mean, I think, you know, social media has built a better mousetrap. People get more of their information there, but I still want local news.
So I just so you know, I think it's really cute when I hear conservatives in North Dakota whine about the media being too progressive when I can't walk into any business or any hospital and Fox News isn't on every TV in this place. So
Yeah, but that's cable, not network, Chad.
Well,
I mean, I agree. I don't disagree with you, but the regulation and the rules are different.
Sure, but we can agree that, I mean, this idea that somehow the media is biased against conservatives in North Dakota, y'all are doing okay on this. And I would also just say on Jimmy Kimmel had a great ratings night last night. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Carr. Thank you, President Trump. And you're right, he's going to stick around for a lot longer than he would have otherwise because of what the FCC did.
Yeah, but there's other things too, like Colbert is Colbert, and I mean, all of that. But Kimmel is probably more associated with ABC. I mean, he's been there forever. And I mean, I haven't watched late night talk. I haven't watched it. I don't know if I've watched one since Letterman and Leno were on. So I'm the wrong metric for this. But I mean, the pendulum, when you swing it hard, it swings back the other way. And I don't want it swinging back the other way when we're not. I mean, the one thing I would push back about is when they do say, well, what happens when they're in charge? I'm like, wait a second, this isn't new. I spent 4 years in Congress dealing with it when it was in charge. And so it goes both sides. And I just generally think everybody should, as government should stay. I mean, the First Amendment, the only two things that really make us unique in the world, really, truly, like we talk about it, is the First and the Fourth Amendment. Those are two very uniquely American things, and we should cherish them.
especially if you see it as they're trying to erode that kind of mentality in Europe. But I think we're talking about broadcast TV, we're talking about cable, all that, but the real battleground these days is social media and 4 channels and game chat rooms and all these other things that are happening. And quite frankly, it's not just people, who are, figured out they can make money by saying crazy things online, but also foreign actors that are using it to undermine. How do we address that piece of it?
Well,
And try to bring some good information to people of the U.S.
Well, and that's a really interesting information. And that's the other thing nobody talks about in this whole debate is a lot of this regulatory regime is back to satellite radio when you only had 3 channels on TV.
Yep.
I mean, it really is a mid to late 20th century relic in a regulatory framework. And we went through all of this, right? Because social media platforms aren't government owned. But we spend way more time talking about what 119,000 people watch on ABC versus the hundreds of millions of people who gather their information from YouTube and Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and X and all of that. But the regulatory part of that's a little different, right? Because when you're they are the public square, but they're a privately owned company. And the other part of the First Amendment is the coerced speech and the forced speech part of that on private companies. So, I think that is really a fundamental. What does privacy and what does free speech mean in the 21st century are going to be some of those larger theoretical conversations that don't necessarily cut along party lines.
Does it start with protecting our children? Because we talk about pornography, but also some of the bad actors who try to influence. I had a great conversation. My daughter's a teacher, middle school teacher, and she's talking about, everybody's talking about social media, but they're getting as much off of game chat rooms and 4 channels as anything. And so my point being is, do we have an obligation, much like we protect, whether it's tobacco or alcohol or any other number of things, are, kind of put a barrier that require that somebody grows up before they engage in that activity? Is there some need to look at social media that way? Because, somewhere along the line, how do we, through regulation or however, deal with the voluminous misinformation that goes on through it, especially as it relates to people coming from outside? We all agree probably Russia and Iran and China are trying to undermine our society. It's an attack on the American people.
Yeah, and it's bot generated and it's AI. How about deep fakes with AI? Somebody will lose an election in the next 2 election cycles because of a fake ad in a close race. These are all things you got to wrestle with. It's just it's so vast. And then look, we did the Pornhub bill this year, right? You have to prove you're 18 before you can log into an internet porn site. Well, you had to prove you were 18 before you could buy a nudie mag when I was in high school. Like it's just a different medium. But I think the real criticism of that law isn't whether you should be able to do it. I think you should be able to prove you're 18 before you can review pornography. The real criticism of the law is it's almost impossible to effectively implement it.
Yep.
Because of the vastness of, sure, Pornhub's not on in North Dakota right now. That doesn't mean 700 other sites aren't. And you can game around them versus cell service versus Wi-Fi, like area codes don't matter. And then the other thing you always got to worry about in North Dakota, if you do in-state restrictions that are too restrictive, we love our state, but if you are going to make your laws significantly more difficult in North Dakota than anywhere else, they can just not participate in the 701 area code.
Governor, I want to transition a little bit to some of your...
Just one thing before we go, because one thought, though, Kelly, Governor, I want to be clear, though, that doesn't mean we shouldn't put the pornography age thing in there. It's not perfect. No solution is going to be perfect, but it will stop some from accessing those or some companies from offering those. So even if it's not perfect, these are things that we need to do because it only makes it better. It may
how do
not
you
be
but
perfect, but better.
how do you hold Call of Duty or PlayStation 5 accountable for two 14-year-olds in a private chat while they're playing Call of Duty? Like,
No.
I mean, the cost of I mean, and I don't mean the cost of regulation. I mean the actual cost of compliance. I mean, the one I do think one thing that's good is parents are getting a little more sophisticated at this, and I think there aren't a lot of good things that happen from COVID, almost none, but our generation got a little better at technology and started understanding some of it a little better. I always say if my dad can use an iPad, anybody can use an iPad.
One of the things that
Yeah,
came up.
you're gonna let the main host ask a question
Oh,
periodically
okay. I'm
during
sorry.
this
Yeah,
call. I'm just saying,
it's fascinating. This is one of my favorite topics. So
Bacon is used to just guest hosting a radio show where it's just him and the guest, and so we're trying to get our rhythm down a little bit. But I want to talk about cell phones. You had two big. When I think about the last legislative session, the two big things I think of: cell phone ban and property taxes. And when we had you on this podcast before, I had a friend's kid sent me a text message when you announced that, and all the text that said was, "I hate Kelly Armstrong." And you handled it particularly well because I think you got worse texts from your friends as kids. But I want to tell you, right before you came on, I got a text from young Ben Gilbertson's mother, and it reads, "One positive thing to report back to the governor. While Ben still hates the cell phone ban, he admits he doesn't have homework now because he gets it all done when he used to be scrolling during free time." I bet this is true for lots of kids. Kelly, I think it might be working.
It is working. And anecdotally, I can tell you, I was in Minot North the second day of school, and in the hallways between classes, kids aren't bumping into each other. They're laughing. It's loud. It's all of that. I had somebody from the Bismarck school system who works in the system say, cell phone violations are up. Everything else is down. Which makes sense, right? You have a new regulation. I had a text from a college classmate of mine who is just out of the blue, who I don't see nearly enough, and she just thanked me for the ban. I think we're a month and a half into it now. School has started, and I think there is psychologists don't like sociology, sociologists don't like psychology, but in this environment, the social psychology of an entire group of kids that are learning how to communicate in different ways and do those things, I think is going to be great. I met with our workforce person yesterday, Chad, and one of the things that we're starting to see from, how we hiring, retaining, and all of that, it's not the technical skills, it's not the educational skills. One of the things that you're seeing from employers is the soft skills. Like it's hard to promote people if they don't have the soft skills. Well, I'm not saying this is a silver bullet, but if you're forced to actually talk to your classmates and your friends until you're a senior in high school instead of just staring at your phone the whole time, I think you're going to start seeing some improvements in those skills as well.
Pat, now it's your turn again, bud.
well, no,
Look at this rhythm that we're off now, Pat.
No, I mean, I first of all, congratulations, because I think you're going to see that's a huge, not only in terms of behavior, but also a learning environment. It also apparently didn't come with the kind of blowback that you expected from parents and kids. That's the other thing. I read a Monitor article on this point. Is that what you're hearing as well? Is that it's being pretty well accepted?
By the way, this is about, attention span, learning, mental health, but also I think from an administrative teacher, parent side of it, somebody who used to be a high school coach, we outsource our communication to technology a lot too. Like it's way easier to go on a group chat and say the bus is going to be delayed for a half hour. And, having that convenience also creates frustration. So I just generally think that, at the same time, we're going to have to teach kids about emerging technology, right? Like we shouldn't teach them ChatGPT when they're a fourth grader because that won't be what they're using when they're a senior. We need to teach them how to educate themselves on whatever the new emerging tech is. But will we have to tweak it? Probably. Are there things we can do to make it better? But I think and then the other answer to this, which I think Chad would agree with, when we deal with education policy in general, we spend a lot of time talking about the margins, right? Special education, advanced education, different procedural groups. I think one of the benefits to this bill is that 75% of kids in the middle are going to benefit every bit as much from this policy as the kids on the margins. And we don't and it's really I'm so happy that the legislature got that done.
Well, and I would just say, I feel like this is one of those things. It's sort of like if you go into a bar right now and people are smoking, and you're like, what do you mean? People used to smoke in bars? I feel like that's where we're going to be in a couple of years with cell phones in schools. Like, of course, kids don't have cell phones in schools. That's ridiculous. Don't you? I mean, and I will tell you, the implementation, far better than I would have ever guessed a month and a half into the school year. We're not hearing any complaints at North Dakota United about the implementation of this thing. It's really amazing.
Well, and we took it off teachers' plate.
Right.
I mean, we took it off. I mean, probably the best part from an actual policy standpoint is we took it off the teacher's plate. They got a hard enough job, and being the cell phone police isn't necessarily, and each school has a different policy, and it could change year after year, and all of the different ways in which the frustrating part of that can be, and then the defeatism for the kid in the back that just doesn't listen, and that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be a really, really positive impact on the next generation of North Dakotans.
Well, since we're in the transitional phase of the discussion, Chad's dying to ask you a question. We're talking about education. He's dying to ask you a question about DPI.
Yeah.
So
sounds like Kirsten's going to get the appointment or get finally confirmed sometime in October.
Depending on a shutdown.
Unless there's a shutdown. I still can't for the life of me figure out why she wants to go to that department in Washington right now. But so... we've talked about this before. Where are you at in this process? I mean, obviously she hasn't been confirmed yet, but your office is thinking about this. Where are you at on this? Do you want to break some news?
No, I don't want to break some news because we'll wait and see what happens. But the thing about Secretary Krista Baszler is I get the DC and North Dakota titles mixed up still once in a while. I do it with our ag commissioner quite a bit as well. But we started this process as soon as the legislative session got out. We have talked to different people, and my number one goal is to make sure that we don't have an interim in place for any extended period of time. We haven't made the final decision yet, but we will be very much able, and we will have the ability to make the final decision very quickly when we know what the confirmation schedule is.
And will she get confirmed and resign basically at the same time? I mean,
yeah. You can't do both.
Because when she gets confirmed, she starts the job, right?
Yeah, obviously whatever that off ramp for her is we will work very closely with that office. But I think just given the dynamics of that and knowing that this is coming, I think we'll be able to put somebody in place right away.
So jumping to another topic that's near and dear to me is I was at the Petroleum Conference annual meeting and saw the panel you were on, and really appreciated all your comments. But I thought I'd give you an opportunity. There are some exciting things going on in North Dakota right now as it relates to energy, plus also how that influences the economy, creation of jobs, all those things all over the state. Touch a little bit about what your administration is doing, but also what you see coming down the road, because, it's big stuff.
Well, first of all, the legislature granted some research money. We don't talk about EERC enough. We just don't. We don't talk about how they're a global leader in not just the oil and gas space, the coal space, everything, and why they give us an advantage. It's important. The Bakken and the Three Forks are mature shale plays, and so I think the most important thing that came out of the legislative session in this space is the east to west pipeline. Or west to east pipeline, and doing it in a way that isn't just like your normal low interest loan. And I think it's really important to recognize that they almost got it the last session, in the 23 session. And I don't think we get this done if they wouldn't have introduced the capacity legislation that actually wasn't taken advantage of. But so moving natural gas out of the Bakken and moving it to the eastern part of the state, we obviously we awarded that thing from the Industrial Commission last month, and that is going to help because gas is associated gas. If you have stranded gas, you restrict production of oil, and it's basic math. We'd just rather have 10% on a barrel of oil than 10% on an MCF of gas. The other benefit to that is every community along that line, before you talk about workforce, before you talk about housing, before you talk about anything else, if you want economic growth, you need to have access to power and water. And this will obviously allow for that to happen. The next question is how do we figure out and create the environment to get companies to risk their capital to figure out how we get another 15% of oil out of that tight shale? And that's enhanced oil recovery, that's CO2, that's NGLs. I mean, it's water flooding. We know how to do this in traditional formations, and we have the opportunity to do this. I'll tell you guys, same thing I told Secretary Wright when he was in North Dakota. Let us figure this out here, because then they'll use it in the Permian, they'll use it in the Powder River, they'll use it in the Eagle Ford, they'll use it all over the country. And we have proven that if we create the right policy that gets these companies to invest their capital here, we'll figure out how to crack it. Senator Hoeven's all on board, Bakken 2.0. And for us, if we crack it for 15%, we don't have any of the problems associated with the original oil boom because the infrastructure is already in place.
Kelly, we had Wes Cummins from Applied Digital on a few weeks ago about Harwood. I mean, this whole data center industry seems super, super exciting. Can you talk about sort of, where you see this going? What's government's role in it? How do we make sure people understand that we've got the energy, we've got the water, we've got the weather to be successful here?
All right. So government's role is threefold. I'll answer the second question first. One is to build the infrastructure that allows them to come here, which is the natural gas. I mean, create the environment to build it, right? The state of North Dakota is not building this pipeline. WBI is building this pipeline, but but we were an active partner in that. Secondly, we coordinate through commerce, willing buyers and willing sellers. Like, if somebody's interested in coming here, we can tell them which communities are looking, how that works. And then the third one, which I think is, and you saw a lot of this in Harwood, is one, alleviating the misinformation, and two, at the same time, making sure this economic growth isn't put on the back of ratepayers. So we have the energy, but we got to make sure that and it doesn't, by the way, it doesn't matter if it's a data center or a potato processing plant or a soybean crushing plant. We can support this growth, but we need to make sure that that power consumption isn't passed on to the residential ratepayers. And so I think we have real opportunities to do that. I think there's a lot of misinformation. Applied Digital is a closed loop system. They don't use hundreds of millions of gallons of water. You can talk about Ellendale, and that was each one of these is unique when it comes to its power situation, but they were actually taking excess power. Nobody's rates have gone up because of the Applied Digital facility in Ellendale. And but I do think that is a role for government to make sure we're not building some large industrial complex that is going to force residents of that regulated community to have to pay more.
No, and I think you make the case on Ellendale. Ellendale, talking to the folks at MDU, brought the rates of all MDU ratepayers down. So done right, it can hold costs down, it can reduce costs for some, but also we've got examples in North Dakota where it has increased rates because it wasn't cited correctly. And so I think that mentality is how we also deal with a lot of the public angst over any of this kind of activity. But the reality is that these data centers are going to get built someplace. Why not here? What are there? A couple hundred jobs in every one of them, and they're good paying. In fact, somebody told me the other day, it's like having a coal plant. It's like they're coal miner wages at these plants.
Yeah. And and by the way, I will tell you, from our perspective, we treat these projects the same as we treat everything else. It's a pretty tight labor market out there. Job Service will tell you we have 13,000 open jobs in North Dakota. When we talk to companies about coming in, we want to know how they're going to handle housing, how they're going to handle workforce, right? Because I don't care if it's Bismarck or Hillsborough, if your goal is to move in and create 50 new jobs and you're going to poach them from the police department and the high school and the hospital, that's not really where we're at as a state. So these guys have been pretty good. I mean, I Applied Digital, they've done a great job. I always use this stat. 36 months ago, there were no restaurants in Ellendale. Now there's 5. Like,
That's quality of living. That's it. That's quality of living we're talking about there. That's good stuff.
well, if a town doesn't have a place where you can take your wife or your husband for an anniversary dinner, you're probably not seeing a lot of growth in that community over the next 10 years. And so that matters. And if you drive down there, there's still ducks in the ditch. There's still corn planted on one side of the road and wheat planted on the other side of the road. It's obviously a huge facility, but the growth and the ability for that community to thrive over the next 50 years instead of just tread water. And there's negatives to all of this stuff, but the positives far outweigh them.
Oh, that's what we've said for the last 30 years. In fact, Chad and I were talking about this, the fact that the Republican Party that came to prominence in North Dakota was a party that was about pro-jobs. In fact, we've said for 30 years in the Republican Party, economic growth and job creation is the tide that lifts all boats. And what you've described there is the tide in the Ellendale area from that economic impact. There are a lot of people in the Ellendale area that won't be paying property taxes because the plant will pretty much pay enough to offset everything. So,
especially when they get their $1,600 credit, $1,650.
Which brings us into the next topic, which is implementation of the property tax credit, which is a huge deal that I don't think people will really come to realize until they pay their first property tax bill and it's down by $1,600.
Yeah, it's tax policy, right? And so it's difficult and it's complicated. And we have said the same thing. I have no doubt in 2 years we're going to tweak it. We'll have to figure it out. Not all political subs budgets are created equal when it comes to property tax. But I think it was necessary. I think the state pays over 50%, if all in, of local shares of property taxes. We had a right to do this. And I think people are going to be, in places like rural Ellendale are a good example. Their property taxes are going to go down significantly. And a lot of them are going to end up being, there are people that are going to pay that their statement will be less than the credit coming back. And that is, this is going to be really, really beneficial and impactful to everybody.
Kelly, I'm going to continue pushing your time boundaries here a little bit, because on property taxes, I assume you saw the press up in Minot where the Minot City Commission blamed the League of Cities for not standing against the cap hard enough, which obviously we both lived through that session. We know where the League of Cities was, and it's completely unfair the way they're being treated here. But that 3% cap, what are you hearing from local political subs in terms of how that's being implemented? It feels like maybe there's not as much pain as people thought there was going to be.
Yeah, and everybody's different, right? There's different. I think you'll see this, and I think it's unfortunate. I think you'll see local political subs that don't like it, that think they got stepped on, will make it as painful as possible to implement the 3% cap.
Yeah.
But for the most part, what you're hearing is, we can do this. We will do it. The more politically in tune, I think local political subs recognize that their constituents wanted this. And again, it's a little like the cell phone bill. Blame me. You want to get me? Don't get mad at the mayor. Get mad at the governor. I'm okay with that. And it's what, like I said, it's tax policy. I don't think this is the last part of the conversation, but I think the positives again are going to far outweigh the negatives.
Mike Schmitz, the mayor of Bismarck, came out in an interview the other day, and he talked about the fact that he supports it because it's relief, but there's also a way to limit the backfill on that, and so you're going to see different reactions, as you just pointed out.
Mayor Boczynski was very helpful. I had Dickinson city commissioners that were helpful. The counties. Cities, depending on your budgets. Even my friends who didn't love it will admit they can get it done over the short term. The question is do we have to tweak it and make sure? Small political subs, counties where more of their budget is appropriated to property tax versus a city or a municipality or in those areas. I mean, so this won't be the end of the discussion, but I think shifting the presumption is important. Now the presumption is going to be we need more than 3%, not you can't cap us at all. And I think that conversation will be really beneficial to the taxpayer.
Well, and short of eliminating North Dakota's gifting clause in its constitution that prohibits gifts, this is a way to get the riches that the oil industry has generated for the state of North Dakota and for everybody in North Dakota, a way to get it back in the hands of the people. I mean, of course, as you know, I'm a big supporter of this mentality, especially now that we have caps in place. That was probably the failings of the early versions of this, where it was just let's throw money at it and hope it, solves the problem. But also for those that struggle or are concerned about it, they have the right to go back to the people and avoid the cap if they want. And ultimately, it's back to the people that decide then, right?
Two things. One, it'll give every homeowner buy-in into the legacy fund. And two, if we continue to push and continue to keep that revenue stream dedicated to property tax relief, there's not very often in property tax policy where you can deliver the relief to the people who need it the most, the fastest, and also deliver over time, give more relief to the people who pay the most. Like you usually have to pick, right? Progressive, regressive, anywhere. And if we allow this to grow over time, we get buy-in into the legacy fund. We give the relief to the people who need it the most, the fastest, and we give more relief to people who pay the most over time. And you don't get that option in tax policy very often.
Well, Governor, I think we've taken more time than we had asked for. I look forward to seeing you on Friday. Governor Armstrong is going to be announcing the North Dakota Teacher of the Year. I think that's on Friday. And hosting the finalists at the Residence. So thank you for doing that to recognize the best and the brightest teachers we have in our state. And as always, thanks for coming on Plain Talk. Go Dodgers.
Anybody who sees this today, if you're not doing anything tonight and you're in Bismarck, we have an honor flight coming home at 7 p.m. and they're awesome. We were there Monday night. It's every time I worry, is it going to be as big as it was the last time? And every year, every single one of these, they get bigger and better all the time. And it is so cool.
The pictures from Monday night were unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, so people should go check that out. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Governor.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode. All right, welcome back to the second half of Plain Talk. We sort of talked with Governor Armstrong a little bit off air about, you got to appreciate Governor Armstrong's willingness to you ask him a question and he answers the question with, I don't want to say no filter, but he doesn't have to worry about spinning because he just gives an honest answer. And it's what I really, really like about him.
Well, and he's also right. It helps to be right, right?
Yeah.
So since we're divining who's right, because we were talking before about you and I disagreeing a lot. And
right.
I think you made the point about you being right. So I think Kelly's more like me then. So.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, like, when you coming out of his first session and his two big legislative accomplishments are cell phone ban and even more so the property tax, those are big wins. Those are big policy changes. And this property tax thing, Pat, people are going to feel it big time once they get that $1,600.
Right. I actually believe that if done right, we could get to a point where we can eliminate property taxes using oil revenue. But in a way that's self-sustaining as opposed to just throw it all at it now. You're right. This is a big idea that people haven't really got their hands around yet. And I know that there are people that, the commercial side didn't get any, or we should have just done away with it. This is a big win for Kelly, but it's a big win for homeowners across North Dakota. I saw an estimate the other day that a third of homeowners in North Dakota would see their property taxes completely done away with as a result of this legislation.
Pat, you think about those rural homeowners whose values of their homes aren't that much. I would guess a majority of people in rural communities are going to be paying nothing in property taxes. So rather than having an initiated measure by Rick Becker that just says, let's get rid of none of that or all property taxes without a plan, we can get there. I'm left of center. I obviously was very much against this property tax measure, not because I love property taxes. I would much rather people get taxed in a more progressive way than based on their property tax. But when there's no plan, it doesn't work. So,
The other thing I love about this approach that they took to this is using the legacy fund. The legacy fund was established to provide some sort of enduring effect for the people of North Dakota from the God-given resources that we have in energy, and especially in oil and natural gas. And so we created this fund, and there's been a lot of talk about how to do it, workforce development, all these things. I have yet to see until this bill a proposal that truly lives up to the promise of the legacy fund. Think of this. You're talking about generations that will have their property taxes reduced or eliminated because of what the oil industry and the oil and resource in this state has done. And you're talking about the potential to affect it for generations because we're using the earnings, not the principal. But that to me is the definition of legacy.
Right. And on top of that, the 3% cap, I think anybody who is paying attention at all to the legislature going in, we were going to get a cap. When Kelly Armstrong wants a cap, the majority leaders want a cap, the Democrat leaders want a cap, you're going to get a cap. So the people up in Minot who are attacking the League of Cities because League of Cities didn't push hard enough against a cap, those are people who wanted to eliminate property taxes. And now they're just mad still about Measure 4. And they're trying to punish League of Cities. But League of Cities was advocating for their members, who you also just pointed out were all over the place on the cap. You got Schmitz, you got Bochensky and others who actually supported it.
Well, and the bottom line is what we learned from going back even to the Hoven plan, the first dollars that went into property tax buy down, was that in the absence of a cap, those dollars got consumed through growth. Then they got backfilled on, and so that just putting money into it isn't enough. You have to have some way to do that. But I thought wisely, the legislature gave you a vehicle to go back to the people and say, okay, we really have a need. Now we know that that's hard. Look at how hard it is to build schools using measures at the local level. But at the same time, if you make your case, we also see from that very example that it can be done if you have the need. So,
well, and I think the governor also pointed out several times it's tax policy. We never don't dabble with tax policy. The 3% cap isn't the right cap, or different political subs maybe have, because I think there is an issue with medium-sized cities and how does that work? Bigger cities I think work. But I think the cap also is good because we've had situations in the past where a city keeps property taxes down, a school keeps property taxes down, and the county shoots them up. The average taxpayer isn't looking line by line as to who to blame. They blame everybody when their property taxes go up. So it's a smart plan.
Well, and it's also not just, the county versus the local or vice versa. It's also from one school, the one school system, one city to another. You have some cities that have been very good about restricting their tax growth and prudent with the money that they spend. And then you have others that aren't. That's kind of what the price that Fargo's paying right now, right?
I agree.
They're kind of in a bind because they've had a lot of excess in that budget that other cities and counties don't have. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now we have to be fiscally responsible because they could raise taxes without any kind of input from the people, even beyond what valuation or organic growth would be. So there'll be an accountability. And that's the word that I think we have to use here. It's not that good or bad. It's the accountability that matters. And that's what this is going to bring is accountability. Everyone's going to have to be tough on their budgets and then make the case with their people. And ultimately the voters will hold them accountable, yay or nay.
Yeah, and you still have the folks that were supporting the elimination of property taxes saying that the governor and the legislature didn't do enough. We had the state GOP who censured the governor for supporting a bill that only got 4 votes against it. Sort of missing something there. Again, when people start seeing that $1,600, there's gonna be a lot of happy property tax owners.
Well, and let's be honest we talked earlier in our discussions about how the political landscape has changed, and there is where the success that Schaefer and Hoban had in terms of building their political party in North Dakota came because the people were with them. Everybody agreed that jobs was the number one issue. As we move into this anti-government populist kind of phase with some people, there's still, I believe the majority look like Ed Schaefer, not perhaps some of the new voices, but you're seeing that play out in like party politics because, of course, in small groups, it's easier to take control of things. And the fact that they would censure the governor for something that was so widely popular, not only with the general public, but with Republicans, shows you how out of touch that crowd can be.
I'm going to go slightly off topic here because I think you set up something I want to ask you about. So you're a guy who's been involved in GOP political politics over the years. I mean, state conventions, the state of the state GOP party. If you're Kelly Armstrong, if you're Julie Fedorchak, if you're John Hoban, do you just ignore the state party? I mean, if you're let's say Kelly Armstrong specifically, why should Kelly Armstrong is much bigger, much more important than the state GOP. They need him more than he needs them. What does this look like, that relationship moving forward?
Well, I think everybody's going to have a different environment depending upon, what you're in. I don't think there's one size fits all for any of these, right? I mean, let's be honest. If that happened, then Gary Nelson would have been the nominee when Ed won, right? Because, I think everybody has to pursue their own whatever works best for them. And that's the same thing for Kelly. I mean, Kelly said it best, is he didn't really care about the censure because, of course, the people were with him, right? But every situation is going to be different, and that's going to play out. It'll be an interesting as we enter term limits, even more so in this next election. It's going to be fascinating to see. And I encourage people ask me all the time, well, should I go to the state convention? Should I go to the district convention? And run as a candidate. And I tell everybody the same thing. Do what works best for you. We have a wonderful system in this state and in this country. You can go to a district convention and run for the legislature or try to get the nomination for, governor or whatever. And then if you don't like the outcome there, you can go to the primary. And every time along this step, whether it's the local party or the state party, or then, of course, the statewide primary, you have an opportunity to involve more and more people in that process. And as a result, I think ultimately we end up with, on average, the best candidates and the best people in those jobs. But it is something that everybody has to decide for themselves of what's the best path. There is no wrong path. Kevin Cramer, when he skipped the convention, made the right decision. Just like John Hoban, when he went to the convention in 2000, and again, just the last time he ran, made the right decision because they were right for him in that situation. And I think that applies to anybody coming down the pike in this, because that's how we get the best candidates and make the best decisions.
One of the things that makes me a little bit nervous is I often hear like traditional Republicans who are being recruited to run for office who say, I don't want to go to the convention. It's a scary thing. And, because it's not a welcoming environment. And part of that's the Big Tent, right? I mean, Democrats would welcome having hundreds of people, right?
Right.
But so if you're trying to get somebody like a normie Republican, a pro-business Republican, to run in this environment, it's a big ask these days. But we've also seen like District 30 when Mike Nathan, Glenn Bosch, and Diane Larson skipped the district convention and just went straight to the primary. I think that made the three of them better legislators because they had to go and knock on doors and talk to the voters in a district that historically has not been competitive. But I do worry that if we put too much emphasis on the district conventions as the only path, that you keep some people out of the process. So I do like what you're saying there, that whatever works best for you, you don't have to go to the convention. You can go straight to the primary.
Because in the end, it's the people we put up through that final piece of that process that matter, and they're the ones that go to November and actually run for election. But that's my point, is exactly that, is every situation is going to be different. We have all kinds of vehicles to get people into the process. And if quite frankly, I understand why some people say, I don't want to be part of the state convention. I don't want to be, because they have become a churn, to say it as softly as I can. But at the same time, for some, it's ideal. And again, that puts more people into play. And at the end of the day, more people to choose from, and we get better candidates. But I don't think there's anything that says you have to go through the convention. Now, remember, there has been an attempt by both sides to restrict the other option. There have been people that wanted to do away with the ability of the district conventions to be a source for candidates, and there are those that wanted to eliminate the primary, even to the presidential level in North Dakota. So, I mean, I'm thinking Curly Haugland and his efforts to eliminate the national primary. Every time you shrink the pool and cut the ways that people can go to get to that final November election, you reduce the competency and the quality of the candidates. That's one of the things I love about our process, is that people can find the best way for them to get on the ballot in November, and that gives us the best choices in terms of that final test.
But it's also really interesting to me. You talk about both sides have tried to do it. The group of folks who are like, it's a smoke-filled back room. That's where all the decisions are being made. And then all of a sudden they've got control of the party system. And they're like, I love this back room. And we saw it up in District 42 when Dustin McNally got appointed, and Brandon Pritchard and others were trying to determine who truly was, or who could vote and who couldn't vote at the district convention. It's an open process, as long because that wing of people will use whatever system works best for them, right? To get what they want.
Which is part of the process, is part of how the system works. The thing that we have to be careful of is putting in place restrictions. I talked to Shane Gettle, who for a long time national committee person, parliamentarian, about exactly what went on in 42. And every district has the freedom to set up the rules that they want to set up. Now, you will probably see as a result of that, some of the more conservative or populist districts try to change the rules so that they can restrict the participants. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. Absolutely the wrong thing to do. We have got to leave it be an open process. And Republicans have succeeded when the tent is big. And of course, the people that want to shrink this down like to say, well, it's too big. There's too many opinions who I don't like. The reality is that in North Dakota, heck, there's not that much difference between Democrats and Republicans, much less the wings of the party when it comes right down to it. And the more people we have in that process, the better off we all are.
So I think it's interesting you said conservative and then corrected yourself with populist, because I do think the folks who sort of fancy themselves as the conservatives in North Dakota Republican politics, in fact, are not conservative. When you look at traditional size of government, role of government, they're anything but conservative. How do the traditional Republicans take back the GNDC scorecard?
Right.
That's sort of when I think about true conservatives, limited government, that kind of thing. I think about that scorecard. I don't think about the people who are banning books or doing all the other stuff that some of the populist folks do.
And that's an advent of kind of a modern day advent of the social issues that have weighed in on that. Unfortunately, it means that we're not as focused. Of course, I think part of that's driven by the fact that we've been fat and happy a long time. And because of hard times will get you focused on the economy. And ultimately, that's where the voters live. So there might be some punishment down the road if we don't kind of turn the focus back. But you're absolutely right. You asked the important question, how do we make sure that we get back on the economy as our main driving force? That's called show up. Elections are not representative of the people. It's representative of the people who care enough to show up. And that's why my message, in whether it's the radio talk show I sub in sometimes or sitting in for Rob, is engage. Engage at the district convention, the state convention, or especially in the primaries, because fringes only succeed in low turnout environments. So if you're concerned about the fringes having too much power and control, make sure you show up.
Yep. No, I think that's absolutely right. Those who show up get to make the decisions. Hey, we sort of talked to the governor about this a little bit, but I know that you didn't love Rob Port's column saying the Kevin Kramer sort of started the government censoring conversation around Jimmy Kimmel. You want to just respond to that? Your thoughts on that?
Well, and I want to be clear. What I was doing was responding to Rob's characterization that Kevin was talking about things like Jimmy Kimmel. It wasn't it. It was the news media that he was responding to in 2016, 2018, and the bias that the national news media had against Republicans, and especially in the presidential election. There's a big difference between a comedian who does a talk show versus somebody who purports to be an unbiased news source using public airwaves. And I think Kelly even approached that a little bit, is that there is a difference there. Fox News doesn't count, for example, because Fox News is not on the public airwaves. But when you have a public enterprise, it'd be like saying, okay, we're going to have the governor or the capital distribute a newspaper that's biased, paid for with tax dollars. It's no different. It's public resources being applied in a biased and politically driven environment. And so that's what Kevin's point was. And I tend to agree that there is a higher standard that should be applied to newscasters in the public domain, which is what broadcast news is that there should be an obligation to have balance, at least balance, if not an unbiased, because they're using something that the public owns. Everything else off the table. And I don't think you can look at entertainment the same way. I think it was a mistake for Carr to say what he said. In fact, unfortunately, it probably is going to work against everybody's interest because this will just prolong. Now he's more of a celebrity than ever as a result of this. So yeah, I thought what he said was awful. I think the public would have punished him, and for even Trump to criticize Kimmel for what he said is not wrong. But when you threaten a license over something like that, that's the point where we might have crossed the line. Yeah. But that being said, when it comes back to news, I think we have to look at that differently. And I'm less concerned about that today than I am, as I pointed out, the whole social media impact. We have got to start putting in some ability twofold. One, to protect our children from misinformation and we have foreign actors who are trying to use our addiction to social media and alternative news sources, feeding that to try and undermine our country, our society and our country. We have to find out a way to do that. Might start with putting some limitations in how kids can access that, even though it may not be perfect. Still better than what we have. And I think we can hold some of these companies accountable, not for individual isolated cases, because like Kelly said, you can't have a game, some video game chat room where two people say something. You can't do that. But we can make sure that they're putting in place systems that will help guard against some of that stuff, and that they're actually working the system. I think they can be held accountable for that.
It is so interesting, listening to you talk about this, because, one of the things I think on the network television thing is who gets to decide what's biased, right? I mentioned earlier, too, I like talking to you because we have sort of a shared set of facts. That's not necessarily the case in today's world, that there's a shared set of facts. So we need to be careful on that. But also you bringing up the gaming systems and the chat rooms. I have an 8-year-old son at my house who is, plays some video games. I think Aaron and I would both agree probably more than he should be. But we have to monitor that, right? We don't know sort of what's being fed. And I can't remember if the 2020 presidential campaign no, maybe it's just the last one, that Kamala was advertising in some of these different gaming systems. Like, there's literally paid advertising within a game. It's a crazy way that we try to get in front of people. So interesting stuff.
No, absolutely. And I think we have to, first it starts with parents, grandparents in my case, but parents, it starts with us first, right? But that doesn't mean there aren't some things that are common sense. We don't allow kids to drink. We don't allow kids to to see X-rated movies. We don't, all those things. There are some common sense kinds of things that we could do, while not perfect, would help the situation and begins there. But also then to make sure that these companies put in place and execute on some parameters that prohibit out of country influences, radicalized, violent behaviors, all those things. I don't want to be able to go after Facebook because two kids came up, or two adults were talking back and forth about doing something untoward, or especially something violent. But at the same time, they should be required, just like we do with pharmaceutical drugs or any other products that you buy and sell in this country, have regulations to make sure that the public is safe in using them. Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, I mean, it's tobacco, right? I mean, you and I have worked on some tobacco stuff in the past, and those safeguards. All right, we've gotten some
one thing on your point earlier, and then I'll let you go to the text messages. You talked about who decides. That's what the courts are for. We set up the laws and the regulations, and then you go, if you don't like what they're doing, you go to the courts. We're seeing that every day play out, and that's how that works.
Courts are making
onward and upward.
Courts are making me nervous these days, as they've probably made you in the past, I suppose, again. All right, so listener feedback. Again, if you want to provide listener feedback to Plain Talk Podcast, you can do so at 701-587-3141. This first one, I love the fact that Pat Finken is here to answer this question. Linda from Bismarck, in response to, we recently had North Dakota Newspaper Association talking about some polling that they'd done that show people really, really appreciate local news, and they'd pay for it. They'd pay more for it. And she says from GNDC, the Greater North Dakota Chamber poll yesterday, it has less popularity for newspapers than maybe the North Dakota Newspapers Association. She's wondering why the two surveys would show such different results. Pat, I'm going to let you respond to this as somebody who's done a lot of public research in your days.
You can't compare these two. They're apples and oranges. One is an online poll that's voluntary participation in, and so you're only going to react to it if you are interested in the topic, and then it's limited in its exposure. So what this is kind of feedback to the membership of GNDC, but not necessarily reflective of the universe as a whole. The other one is not a voluntary sample. It's probably taken through some sort of where we interrupt the flow of a person's day. But even this poll in the past has only surveyed sometimes people that subscribe to the newspapers. So the bottom line is that the difference can be explained probably in terms of the way the sample is taken and where that sample comes from. But I'm not surprised by these different reactions to the polls, because of course they're asking two different groups of people that have different motivations. And the way to do this, to get a true sense, is you have to have some sort of a representative sample of the adult population as a whole, if you really want to understand what's going on when it comes to local news.
Yeah, and I think, Pat, we both agree often polling is used to push a certain agenda. So looking at how the poll is conducted, how questions are asked, is very, very important to know if it's reliable or not. And, the other thing that I think people forget, there's a plus or minus in polling. This is not an exact number. It gives you an idea of a snapshot in time. So the sample matters.
Oh, absolutely. Sample size. In fact, on a GNDC poll, I don't think you can even apply a margin of error because, of course, it's not randomized in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
So.
Right. Second text is from Andrew up in Minot, who is responding to the conversation. We alluded to it a little bit here today that Rob and I had regarding the city of Minot pulling out their membership from League of Cities over the Governor Armstrong's very popular property tax bill. It says, since you're looking for guest suggestions as a lifelong Minot resident, I'd like to hear from City Commissioner Samuelson about his motion to pull out of the League of Cities. that has been passed on to Rob, and Rob may be reaching out to City Commissioner Samuelson. So again, to leave us a voicemail or a text, you can reach us at 701-587-3141. Love the listener feedback. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and X at Plain Talk ND. Looking forward to Friday's episode with Justin Kringstead, who's the executive director of North Dakota's Pipeline Authority. We hit a little bit of that with Governor Armstrong today, but pipeline's a big deal, important economic driver for the state. So with that, hey, Pat, thanks for hosting today. It's been fun.
It was a great discussion. You're right. We oftentimes are on opposite sides of equations, but it's always an educational and a rewarding conversation. So I appreciate the opportunity today.
I was given the opportunity to pick who my conservative co-host was, and I picked you because I thought there'd be some interesting conversation. So
well, and now you may regret that because, of course, you couldn't get a word in edgewise. But that's it's your own fault then.
Yeah, it is my own fault, but here's the deal. We've had Drew Wrigley on the podcast before.
Oh,
so I'm
never
used to
mind
that.
then.
We're right now checking if Drew listens to the podcast, see if we get a little feedback. So, all right. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right, see ya.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
Well, they're terrible, but at least they have no hope. So